Bitcoin is going to reduce the size of government. The future is Bitcoin. What would happen if he just said, okay, you're not fired, I'm just closing down the Fed? All of these things are on the table. If he comes in with an executive order to buy some Bitcoin right off the bat, and then he works towards moving Senator Lummis's bill forward and passes that in 90 days, all bets are off. The whole world is going to change.
It's almost like this golden window of opportunity for Bitcoin, and it almost feels like a Cold War where the different players are sitting and we're kind of waiting who's the first one to press the button and buy as much Bitcoin as they can.
If the federal government needs to generate Bitcoin, they're going to have to create value. They have to work really hard to obtain Bitcoin, and they're going to be competing with other nations to obtain that Bitcoin. They're less incentivized to go to war with other nations, but the federal government itself can't maintain its current size. The Great Depression was caused by the money printer. So are the Great Wars. They're caused by the money printer. Without the money printer, you won't have great wars.
You're in where you are? At Alaska, you said?
Correct. I'm in Juneau, the capital. It's probably the smallest capital in the country. We've got about 30,000 people, 40 miles of road, no roads in or out of Juneau. So it's unique. Mostly government workers here in Juneau. So yeah, it's a beautiful area located in Southeast Alaska. So,
and you just said also that you're working with the state legislature. What are you doing there?
Correct. I work in IT for the Alaska State Legislature.
Okay, so not on the legislation side where you push Bitcoin or something like that?
No, on the legislative side, I know everybody across the way, but I don't work in policy. I'm on the agency side, so I support the political side, make sure their day-to-day operations they're functional. It gives me good opportunities to meet and have conversations with different people across the way. I learn a lot about policy, and they learn a lot from me.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really cool. And you're also a veteran. There's a whole podcast around that, like Bitcoin veterans. I had someone on there. How is it called? Bitcoin veterans? Is that the name? Do you know about it?
Yes, I'm a member of Bitcoin Veterans. We have it started out with just a few people. There was a primary pod and podcast group. So as soon as Bitcoin Veterans kicked off, I remember Alex Stanzik launching it off, announcing it on Cafe B. He didn't launch it, but he announced it on Cafe B. So I hopped right on board, and we started a whole bunch of channels on signal groups. Everything having to do with from regional chat groups for veterans who are Bitcoiners to we have groups from regional chat groups to we have a pilots group. We have a group on people who are building out different communities in their areas. We have radio chat. We have cybersecurity and operational security. So we took our expertise from being in the military and we brought them to a group outside the military. So we still retain that camaraderie that we had in the military as people get out. And veterans communicate a little differently than the normal average person. So we're a little more mission driven. So we're able to build out things, I don't know, differently, sometimes better, because we have a leadership structure, not necessarily in the groups, but we understand, I guess, the brotherhood of being in the military, brotherhood, sisterhood of being in the military. So yeah, we had a great event in Nashville at the Bitcoin 2024 conference. We had a breakout room, 3,000 square feet. We had everything from people teaching Bitcoin mining to Meshtastic radios to Travis West did a presentation on the blockchain. Max Kaiser came down and spoke on our stage. And yeah, it was just, Nashville was incredible for Bitcoin veterans. But we're continuing to build. So I expect great things from the community because as it grows, we encourage each other. We help each other with our different projects. So if you're a veteran and you're dabbling in Bitcoin, you're starting to try to understand it, or you've been in the community for a while, but you haven't joined our group yet, I strongly suggest people come on over. And then we have all these other subgroups within Bitcoin veterans, like Scott Lindbergh with Free Market Kids, who's a Bitcoin veteran. Gabe Lord with Operation Bitcoin, he's a Bitcoin veteran. Bitcoin Alaska, that's me, Bitcoin veteran. So we have all these adjacent groups. Also, me, Scott, and Gabe are also me Premier Bitcoin light nodes. So we teach the curriculum as well. So yeah,
really cool. I love that.
expect a lot of great things coming from Bitcoin veterans. And we're putting on this Bitcoin Alaska conference that's put on by Bitcoin veterans. So
I like it. Alaska is kind of above Canada or next to Canada, if I'm correct.
correct. We are, if you could drive over the ice field, we're about 20, 30 miles from Canada here in Juneau. So it's just a little panhandle on the south side of Alaska. So we're right next door, but it's a little bit longer of a ride because you have to take a ferry out of Juneau or take a plane and then drive across the border to get there.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, just like geographical for me, that's new areas. I think I never spoke with anyone from Alaska directly, like someone who is actually there. It's always like the region that you like. I know South America, I know America, the United States, I know Canada, I know Mexico, and all those things. But Alaska is kind of like, I know that it's somewhere there, but I never really hear anything from there. How many people are there actually?
600,000 to 700,000 people total population. Juneau has 30,000, so most of the population lives up in the Anchorage area, up in the
Also,
interior.
there's like 500,000, like 600,000 people there.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's like half of Vienna. That's but it's way bigger than Vienna, right? The area is quite big.
Yeah, it's about a third of the size of the U.S., so a lot of land.
Wow. So like there's like a small village, and then there's like very long nothing. Is that how it's structured?
Yeah, and most of the land up here is managed by the federal government. It's one of the things I like about Bitcoin is, I believe it's going to reduce the size of government. And as it reduces the size of government, things like federal management of lands will cease, and states will have more control over their lands. I'm a strong believer in local government and state government, and people closer to government should make policy around their regions. So I enjoy the fact that, Alaska being so heavily controlled by the federal government, eventually it being able to break down too, so that people in Alaska can take advantage of the resources that we have in the land that we have here.
Interesting. How big of a topic is it in Alaska? The Bitcoin topic and the meetup scene and stuff like that.
It started with when I got started in Bitcoin back in 2014, 2015. 2015 is when I really just started diving in. There was nobody. I've met a couple people who were into Bitcoin, got into Bitcoin around the same time as me, but it didn't really kick off here in Juneau until I started having meetups. A lady came to me and asked me if I could educate her so she could talk to her friends about it. And then she'd come back to me with questions, and I just told her that wasn't going to work. Just have everybody come to my house. And it's grown ever since. Now I've talked to, we had weekly meetings for a couple years. I've spoken at different local events and when you're speaking at these events, I don't mean like going up and giving presentations. These are more hostile people who will launch questions at you from left field, and you just have to address them. So it's more challenging than just being on a pod. This is fun, but when you're in front of 100 people who are just bombarding you with, well, what about gold? And it's digital. What if, power is knocked out? And you're just being blindsided. That's challenging. I really enjoy those too. But now I've directly orange pilled probably about 40 people here in Juneau. So out of 30,000 people, that's not bad. But now in the Capitol building, everybody knows I'm a Bitcoiner. I make it known. I'm a target. But at the same time, when I got into this, I really wanted to make sure that when people had questions, they didn't go to bad sources. And that's one of the reasons why I started teaching people, was there's so much bad content out there. And I got tired of people going to, every 4 years, the cycle. It's all those altcoins pop up and all the frauds come out. And I really wanted to make sure that the people here didn't get attacked by these groups, by all the big money that's flowing into all these other entities. So I launched a website and I started putting up content, videos of podcasters and speakers and people who we all know really well, Mahler, Seyr, people who are really down the rabbit hole and can guide people in the right direction. And that helped a lot. We'd spend a lot of time at the house watching those videos. But now because of that, people come to me with my opinion and also come to me asking where to find, whatever information on whatever question that they have. So it's really helpful, especially at places like the Capitol building where, I'm wandering the hall. I was in the elevator with a security guard the other day and they started hitting me up because they're a veteran and had a bunch of questions. And so my role here at the Alaska State Legislature is IT, but I'm a Bitcoiner and I don't hide it. So, just like, and the way I see it is while I'm non-political and I don't take a political side left or right of anything, if I'm a boater, I'm going to talk about boating. I am a boater. I love to fish, but also if I'm a Bitcoiner and if you want to talk about that topic, I'm more than happy to sit down with anybody in the Capitol building and have the conversation off hours, of course. So I look forward to those conversations this year because they're going to, I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of people with a lot of questions.
And I feel like your actual role in there is Bitcoin and not IT.
Yeah. Well,
like unofficial role.
Well, unofficially, I talk about what I like to talk about, right? So if I'm doing updates on your machine, no.
Then you can. I had. I don't know what exactly you're doing, but I was actually in civil service, and there, quickly the thing got around that I'm good with computers. So I was half time actually the IT guy, and half time I was the actual civil service who does things with kids and all the things. So it was also fun for me. I had my own car and drove around the country and just like switched PCs, updated stuff and stuff like that. So I know there's a lot of time in between if you handle someone to talk with them. And this was also the time where I was slowly getting into Bitcoin, and it was a fun time to orange pill organizations while they have to wait for your computer to update.
Exactly. We have them hostage, right? They, and you can only move so fast. You got to wait for the bar to go across the screen. So.
Yeah, and you have to talk something, then let's use the time for Bitcoin. But that's exactly the grassroots movement that we need. People that just do their job, and next to that they are the Bitcoin soldiers in the field, the Bitcoin veterans that are really trying to orange pill the world one by one, and just trying to educate the people that are around you and ask and getting to that. Like that's the actual Bitcoin war zone, if you like, to have like 50 people in front of you who say like, oh, but isn't it volatile? Isn't it bad for the environment? Isn't it that and that? So that's kind of the real being orange pill, because this is like really comfortable. I only invite Bitcoiners. It's like I can do this every day. I know where what I'm getting into. That's like really a comfy environment. But getting out there and speaking with the people that are not already kind of orange pilled, that's the hard work, and I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, the nice thing about Alaska too is, the legislative body, they don't understand it yet. They'll get there. I have faith that they'll get there. I hope they'll get there. But we have microgrids all over Alaska. So trying to have cheap energy there is none in the remote areas. So being able to have a buyer of last resort to be able to go in and mine Bitcoin, or these communities don't have a lot of money. So how can they generate revenue while they're building out their energy infrastructure? Bitcoin's the answer for so many things in Alaska. You look at and then we have the Permanent Fund Corp. Permanent Fund Corp manages $80 billion of money. How that works is back in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, we started setting aside money, a percentage of the money revenues generated from oil and minerals. People think it's just oil. It's not just oil. It's resource extraction from Alaska. So money set aside, it's invested through the Permanent Fund Corp, and then a permanent fund dividend gets paid out to the people across Alaska. And a lot of people see that as a socialist type system, but it's not, because it's private entities extracting resources. The money goes into a public corporation that then invests those monies, and those revenues drive profits that are paid back to Alaskans to help people afford to live in Alaska. But more recently, with inflation, the permanent fund can't afford to continue on paying the people the same amount of money. And as government grows, government wants to utilize those funds in different ways. So they're tapping into more and more of what people sometimes call the people's money. There's a solution for all of this, and it's frustrating knowing the solution, and the solution is just simply Bitcoin. They need to, if they were to invest in Bitcoin and Bitcoin infrastructure, they could afford to, and if they were to, instead of taking a percentage of the revenues generated from extracting oil or minerals, if they were to do the same thing with Bitcoin mining across the state, we could generate revenue in Bitcoin and pay permanent fund dividends in Bitcoin if we so choose. It's a paradigm. It would be a paradigm shift for the state. Right now, like ever since the early 80s, we've been capping all our oil wells. So there's something like 30 zettawatts or something. That's some massive amount of natural gas that is in capped oil wells, because we cap all our wells, and that requires maintenance to maintain those wells. And the government body has to, Department of Environmental Conservation has to monitor those wells. So that's an expense on government. So now if we were to mine Bitcoin on those capped wells, we generate revenue as well as income, not only for a mining operation, but also for the Permanent Fund Corp, which then could benefit and help fund state government and build out the infrastructure of the state. So the answer is quite, I'd say quite simply, but it would be very difficult to do. But the future is Bitcoin, and the future of Alaska is Bitcoin. We have so much stranded energy, from natural gas to hydro here in Southeast to geothermal in mid-Alaska, central Alaska. So there's so much opportunity here in Alaska. I don't think there's as much opportunity in any other U.S. state, not nearly as much as there is here in Alaska. So that's why we're putting on the Bitcoin Alaska conference here in Juneau, is I believe that policy is driven in this small area with 30,000 people, no roads out. So we have a locked in amount of people that can't escape. So as we have this conference over the course of a week and bringing in enough Bitcoiners to actually start orange pilling the community, I think it'll have an impact that'll drive across the state.
Interesting. There's a lot of nation state topics currently, especially with Trump coming into office and talking about maybe he signs executive order, or maybe he does it later with the bill. And then BRICS are talking about it. Even Russia is talking about it. So how is that looking like in Alaska? Is that a thing that is possible, that they're using that funds, and maybe something else even? Has Alaska their own currencies? Sorry, I have almost zero knowledge about Alaska.
Alaska is a state, so we use the U.S. dollar. We have one mining operation that I know of that has started Bitcoin mining in the interior. I think it's the Hildebrand Corp, Hill Corp, under Jeff Hildebrand, I believe. And then I do know that I do believe that he is Jeff Hildebrand is friends with or knows our governor, Mike Dunleavy. So I believe that we are going in the direction of adopting Bitcoin across the state. At least at the same level as the next administration does at the federal level. So I look forward to this conference this year, because I believe it's going to bring bipartisan people to the conference, because policy will be driven towards Bitcoin here in the state.
Interesting. Yeah. I was that might be bad for me to admit, but I was not aware that Alaska is a state of the United States. I had zero knowledge.
A lot of people in the U.S., they didn't realize that up until recently. It seems like back in the 80s, I lived here in the early 80s and I moved away. And that was the question I got in school down south. And, I moved from Alaska to New Mexico, and nobody, and the questions were, do you live in an igloo? It's no, I live in a house. It's a mile from an ice field, yes, but it's still a house.
What are these ice fields? Is it really just like ice? Is it underneath a ground, or is it underneath water? Or like, how does this look like?
It's a massive amount of ice that I believe is about a mile high, and as it pushes down, it creates these glaciers or these rivers of ice that go out these valleys. So, and underneath it, depending on, I guess, what the stage the Earth is in at the time, but now it seems like we have more water running underneath the ice, which is melting more of the ice. But as the climate cools, it's going to reverse that. It's just a matter of what cycle the Earth is in at the time.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so amazed with Alaska. It's hard to go focus on Bitcoin.
That's why. So a lot of the conferences that people have across the world is you go to an area and you go into a convention center and that's what you do, right? That was the conference. But in Nashville, the veterans, we did something different. We had a range day, we had a Bitcoin veterans run, we had a party at a downtown club. I went to Anders' party, which was great. I'm so sorry to hear about what happened to his home in California there. His home was one of them that burned to the ground. A spectacular party there, though, in Nashville. And then our breakout room. And then I went to Bitcoin and Biscuits with Loomis and Vivek and a bunch of people. That was fun. But we had all these events that went on. And a lot of these conferences, they have these, and the unconference, the Me Premier Bitcoin unconference that was put on by veterans and Me Premier Bitcoin. But here in Juneau, I decided that I need to do something like that here. So we're going to have the Vets Run, the Range Day. I've got the Native One People Canoe Society is going to paddle us out to an area where we're going to have a day-long picnic on the beach. And then for the Whale Pass, I just didn't want to do the same thing that they do in other places where you have a $3,000, really expensive, exclusive seating, you're near somebody Whale Pass. So we chartered a 78-foot, two-story catamaran to go up Tracy Arm Fjord. This is where I'm going with this, is the glaciers. So it's an all-day cruise with the speakers, locked in on the same boat with you, so you can build relationships, get to know the people who are coming to speak, and go up and see the glaciers and the whales and the bears and the goats and everything else. So, and then I priced that like $800. I just wanted to get people on the boat to meet these people and enjoy Alaska and watch the hydro pouring off the mountainsides and talk Bitcoin mining. I just think that's going to be so much better than sitting in a conference hall.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that. And the $800, is that for the conference, or is that on a special tour?
The regular conference is 2 days at the Centennial Hall downtown, and that's $400. But the Whale Pass includes the general admission on top of going on the cruise. So it's a $400 cruise here locally. I just priced it in on top of the conference fee.
I love that. Really cool. That sounds like an amazing opportunity. I might even do that. When is that in 2025?
The Whale Pass is July 3rd, but the conference, all the satellite events begin July 1, and they're over on July 6th. So you'd want to be here like June 30th to July 7th to get everything in there.
Oh, that's nicely after the Bitcoin 2025 event then.
Yep. Come on over.
Bitcoin 2025, I will be 100% there. I'm already confirmed as a speaker there. And yeah, I have to see it, but it's something I will definitely look at if I wasn't aware of the conference, but I will see it. It's probably like Bitcoin at Alaska 2025. I can find it.
BitcoinAlaska.org.
2095. Let's see if I can find it. BitcoinAlaska.org. Yeah, there. Let me pull it up so people can see it also from the podcast. It's let's share that quickly. Window. Tuck. Oop. That's probably it, right?
Yep, that's it.
Welcome to Juneau. Perfect. That looks so cool. There's a mountain pass and a whale pass.
The difference is you'll see whales on our Whale Pass. You'll have whales inside the boat and outside. And we've got some good speakers. We've got Alex Gladstein coming up with Human Rights Foundation. We've got Lisa Huff, the mother of Bitcoin, and Gabe Lord. We've got Joe Kelly from Unchained. We've got some really good speakers coming up for the conference.
Yeah, Lisa is great. She was already 2 times on my podcast, and she's a great speaker. I love that. I love her. Really cool, perfect. But yeah, let's get back to Bitcoin. So sorry for my short Alaska laugh here. You said something interesting in a sentence I just remembered. You said you make yourself a target, or you're a target because you're a Bitcoiner. Something along this line. I don't remember exactly. What did you mean by that?
So when I first let everybody know I was a Bitcoiner, it seemed like, on the job, off the job, wherever I was in the community, people had a different view of Bitcoin way back when. And so we might have been ridiculed to some degree, laughed at. But it's funny, over time that turned into, some people asking questions while other people might snicker off in a corner, to now it seems like everybody just wants to ask questions. So earlier on, especially around 2020, people here had no clue what it was, had no understanding of it. And that's when we really began our local meetups. And now, one person at work would scream down the hall, "Hey, Bitcoin guy," just kind of a derogatory tone, like, "Hey, laugh at this guy." But now it's just the opposite. Now the people who don't understand it are silent, or they come and ask questions when they're ready. So it went from a laughable topic to a serious topic. So as a target, a few of us had to put ourselves out there. People who do pods, people who go about their daily lives and have those conversations with their family, and their family might, not understand it. So their automatic reaction is whatever the mainstream news might have said about it at the time. Or, "Oh, it's magic internet money. It's not backed by anything. So I can't believe this person's wasting their time," just because they didn't have an understanding of it. Whereas now, we're not a target anymore. We are the people that they turn to. And it's those brave people who stood up and explained the topic to people and had those conversations and weren't afraid of being laughed at, who those people are now turning to. So it's nice to feel that energy go from a negative energy to a positive energy, from an uneducated conversation to a let's dive deeper. Every time you have a conversation with somebody, you go further down the rabbit hole and you take them on a journey further, and you figure out where they're at. Like if their interest is human rights and they're looking at Tomer's videos, you can turn them on to Alex Gladstein. Or if they're interested in the national security, you can turn them on to, Bitcoin veterans and our content. Or like there's all these different rabbit holes you can go down. If they're interested in mass migration, you can start breaking down how it will affect mass migration, or how it will affect drugs and how they're distributed across the world, and the Cantillon effect and getting closer to the money printer, and how the drugs flow into the US because we control the money printer, and how if we don't control the money printer, then those drugs won't be incentivized to flood our nation. Like there's all these different rabbit holes you can go down. That's really what I enjoy, is going down those different rabbit holes and identifying where people are at, where they're at in their life, what is important to them. Are they a bartender who is just struggling day to day and they want to have a way to save money? Well, tip in Bitcoin, visit them a few times, show them the number go up, and then help them, get an account with some company to purchase Bitcoin, and then teach them self-custody. Or are they on the human rights side, and they just want to understand it more deeply on that level? That I really enjoy the conversations and all the different directions they can go, and where people are at, and finding where that is, and just letting your mind go. It's so novel that all of these topics are they're fun.
I partnered up with Coin Vigilante. This is the most beautiful Bitcoin timepiece that I ever saw created by anyone. Look at that beauty. I love it so much. Coin Vigilante made a perfect Bitcoin watch. That's the perfect, subtle, elegant way to go out there and show that you are a Bitcoiner. And that watch brand is Bitcoin only. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there. And of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. And make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. If you watch or listen to my podcast on a regular basis, I guess you already bought some Bitcoin. And now the most important step is to keep the Bitcoin. Keep them secure in a hardware wallet. My personal recommendation for hardware wallet is the BitBox. It's super secure, it's simple to set up. It's also a perfect gift for a friend who has still their Bitcoin on an exchange. And you can get a 5% discount with the code Robin at the checkout. Visit bitbox.swiss/Robin to get your BitBox. And the next step is to really level up your sovereignty as an individual. You have to have the most secure self-custody setup. You have to secure your own devices. You have to protect your privacy. You have to set up an inheritance plan. And depending on where you live, you even want to have a plan B, a citizenship where you can move in case something goes really wrong. And through all those steps, the Bitcoin way is guiding you through step by step. And if you visit thebitcoinway.com/partners/Robin, you even get a 30-minute free call to find out how you can level up your sovereignty. I love that. It's almost like this, what you described of like not being a target anymore. It's more of like this career risk is also flipping. All of a sudden, politicians can speak up about it. All of a sudden, CEOs can speak up about it. All those positions that previously were like only Bitcoiners in their private life or not talking about anyone with Bitcoin, but still being a Bitcoiner. Now like I'm a Bitcoiner. It's almost seems like it slowly flips from not wanting to speak up to slowly to getting to the point, and I hope we will get there, where if you are not a Bitcoiner, you're not cool. Like you almost have to say that you're a Bitcoiner to be in that cool club, and we are slowly getting to that spectrum, and it's interesting, and it's really fun to observe how this flipping of the narrative, flipping of the career risk or being a target and stuff like that is slowly progressing. And I think 2025 and the coming years will be huge in that transition. I love to see that.
Yeah, I feel it already. We're already there in a lot of ways, as far as it being a cool topic, and it will be more cool here in the next month or so as the next administration comes in, as legislation's pushed, and people think that it's amazing. People still think that Bitcoin's kind of a political issue, but it's really not. It's bipartisan. Like, sure, one party may like it more than the other, but that goes with any topic. You can always count the votes on any topic, but both sides of Congress own Bitcoin. It's a game theory playing out that we've been talking about for 10 years, that, as people said, well, the government will never accept it. No, the government won't accept it, but all the members of the government will. So the government will do whatever. The government is not an entity. It's not a life form. It feels like it sometimes, but it's not. It's the people, the individual people, and they're incentivized to own it.
Absolutely. What do you expect from the next administration to do about Bitcoin? Trump is sometimes like a jolly joker that is not 100% like we know what we will do. A lot of things are possible. What do you expect from that?
I expect a lot. We live in really interesting times. A lot of people will look back at this time, and there's a lot of negativity in the world today, more than there was in, say, the 80s. It felt like a different world than back in the 1980s, whereas now it seems like it's more hostile. There's not as much building. Music's not the same, TV is not the same. But now with Bitcoin, as it changes everything, I feel like this is more the golden age, and we're going to go places that. Like, I just feel this year is a turning point. It's going to be a big year, with Jay Powell coming out and saying he can't be fired. I know Trump doesn't like to be challenged. I don't know much about him, but he does not like, when you challenge him. So what would happen if he just said, okay, you're not fired, I'm just closing down the Fed? I mean, all of these things are on the table. Do I expect that they'll happen? I'm hopeful. It would just be amazing to me if he said, well, no, you're not fired. We're just going to default on our debt to the Fed, and we're going to make good on the rest of our debt, and we're going to buy Bitcoin. Go find your retirement home. It's, so this is just a great year. If he comes in with an executive order to buy some Bitcoin right off the bat, and then he works towards moving Senator Lummis's bill forward and passes that in 90 days, all bets are off. The whole world is going to change. I really hope people are on board and understand that, because if Trump does go down that route, if he starts taking that path with the executive order and the purchase 1 million Bitcoin reserve, Bitcoin strategic reserve, then he's going to push out to the states. We need Bitcoin mining operations. So Alaska is going to get hit with, now it's going to be, we need to extract the oil, not only because we need the oil, but we need to extract the oil so we can get at the natural gas, so we can throw the Bitcoin miner on top. So it'll change how every state is funded. If the federal government will be more prone to support states that are mining Bitcoin and are producing it than states that aren't. State of Alaska, prime example, when we put in the pipeline, we had a lot of federal funds have flowed into the state over the decades. And that's because we had the oil pipeline, which it's not nearly as full as it used to be. I wouldn't even call it partially full. It's almost a slow trickle. So now and we had that support from the federal government because we had all that oil flowing down to the lower 48. But as that goes away, those funds dry up. It's going to be the same way with Bitcoin and states. If the states can produce the Bitcoin, the government will probably invest more into the infrastructure of the state to support the Bitcoin mining operations. So I believe that if Trump goes down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin strategic reserve, all the states will be really quickly adopting Bitcoin, and the infrastructure will be focused on those operations. Especially and to add to that, we've got the national security aspect, the block space. If we need to have Bitcoin mining, we need to decentralize that. We need to have a certain amount of that here in the U.S., but we want it located, distributed throughout the U.S. There's just going to be a large push.
Interesting. It's almost like this golden window of opportunity for Bitcoin, and it's almost feels like a Cold War where the different players are sitting and we're kind of waiting who's the first one to press the button and buy as much Bitcoin as they can, and it starts this whole FOMO, because it still feels a little bit of the calm before the storm right now, where he will be soon in office, but currently nothing, even the Russia-Ukraine conflict, nothing is happening currently there, because soon Trump will be there. Let's see what he is doing. It's an interesting time to be alive, that's for sure. And I like this saying of it could trigger in a really interesting time window for Bitcoin and this golden era, maybe even a gold rush. I could imagine, especially one thing that we kind of forget with all those nation state theories. We have also still the first year of Bitcoin ETFs that just kicked off a year ago, and those were, when we compared this to gold, were really positive for the adoption from a gold standpoint. And I think it will do a similar thing to the Bitcoin. And on top of that, we have the S-curve adoption, we have the nation state game theory, we have all those things coming together. The next 5 years could be could be crazy.
It's going to be an amazing time this year. But what I find interesting is something that I haven't heard anybody talk about, but it hit me a couple weeks ago, and I've been pondering it, is the Bitcoin strategic reserve. We had the gold strategic reserve and the whole Bretton Woods. And with that, we took the inefficient dead yellow rock and we mined it from the ground, and then we shoved it back underground and we printed against the rock. Now we put the rock back underground and we printed against it because it was the inferior technology for a monetary system. No, I'm not a big believer in fiat currencies, But the rock was inferior. If you listen to any Lynn Alden, the gold died with the telegraph. It maybe didn't die, but it lost a lot of its value with the telegraph because you could transact globally, you just couldn't transact. So you couldn't send them the money. So you needed the fiat. So now with the Bitcoin strategic reserve, if we're backing our dollar with Bitcoin, we're actually taking the better asset for transacting and we're shoving it in underground and we're backing it with fiat. So it's interesting to think about it that way, because why are we taking the inferior technology and continuing to use it and shoving the other one in a box, and we're going to back our dollar with the Bitcoin? So where does that go? Well, of course, we all know where that goes. That's just game theory, and people will keep transacting in Bitcoin, and people will care less and less about the dollar. Sorry,
go ahead.
So it's just we're instead of taking the inferior technology and shoving it in the ground, we're taking the superior technology and shoving it in the ground.
So this is the innovatable end, like that's the beginning of the end of the US dollar, kind of what you're saying.
Yes.
Yep. I feel also like that. Like a lot of people say, like, no, we always have fiat currencies on top of Bitcoin, maybe, and stuff like that. And I'm like, why would you do that? I get it with gold, because it's really hard to, if I want to send you now $50, that's really hard for me to do with gold. It's even hard to do with fiat. The easiest thing for us to transact would be, let's do it over Lightning. Let's do a Bitcoin transaction. That would be the easiest thing to do for the both of us. So why would we put on an inferior technology on top of Bitcoin? Like that has absolutely no upside. It's worse in transactions, still manipulated, and it has no value at all except the peg of the Bitcoin. But they will not peg it to anything, because then they can just directly use the Bitcoin also. So you don't have any securities around the fiat anyways. And then you have the same system that we have now, just that maybe they own some Bitcoin, which doesn't change anything for me. That's not an improvement. Like that does nothing for me, I feel like. But yeah, maybe we're dreaming. I hope we're not. Really, really interesting. Maybe suiting to that topic, especially also because you're in the Bitcoin veterans group. What will Bitcoin do to war, military, and that topic for you?
So we all know that war is funded through fiat. So just if the federal government needs to generate Bitcoin, they're going to have to create value. So they create value through mining operations. They have to work really hard to obtain Bitcoin, and they're going to be competing with other nations to obtain that Bitcoin. So they're less incentivized to go to war with other nations. But even more so, in my mind, I believe that the federal government itself, it can't maintain its current size. So as Bitcoin is adopted, they won't be able to debase the dollar to fund the federal government. That means they have to front end tax everybody. And if they front end tax everybody, a lot of those revenues, the states are going to insist on having those revenues. Local communities are going to need those revenues. So I don't believe as much of it's going to go to the federal government. So we're not going to be able to have a military of a massive size. If we go back to OPEC, that was the treaty with Saudi Arabia, where we said we would protect you, but you have to sell us cheap oil, and every other nation has to buy energy in dollars. So what did that do? Well, the U.S., I remember a lot of virtue signaling back in the 80s, and of course we all bought into it with, there's this person supporting child labor in this other nation, so they're a bad person. Well, the irony behind that is those nations that aren't able to produce energy have to get dollars and compete to get those dollars so they can purchase cheap energy, so they can air condition their homes and have lights in hospitals. So we incentivized the bad behavior that we were so outraged by through OPEC. But to take that further, because every other nation had to compete for the dollar, we could print to infinity. So we as OPEC sold their oil in dollars and every other nation competed for the dollars, they sold items to us for cheap. That got rid of US industry, and our primary export became the dollar, and we exported our inflation on the rest of the world. And since we were the only ones who could export our inflation, no nation could have a military that could even come close to the size of ours, because we just keep printing to build more equipment, more government contracts going to Lockheed and Granger and whoever. So now, without being able to print to infinity, we cannot have a military that is printed to infinity to compete with the rest of the world. So war, if virtually all conflicts around the world involve the US, it's interesting to look at. If it's not directly, we're funding them, we're sending equipment to them, we are putting people in power that we have no business having anything to do with. Another nation is another nation. They're not our nation. They shouldn't be ours to control. They're not a state of the US. So we shouldn't be in their part of the world. So as Bitcoin empowers the individual in those nations to take on their governments, which is a great empowerment for everybody in all those other nation states, but it also removes the ability for the US to hinder the individuals in those nations to form their own, societies.
That's super interesting. Yeah, it's almost like when you take away the money printer, you take away their ability to fund all those things, and with that, I guess there will still be conflicts, but they will be probably smaller and way more limited, because you have to convince your own people to fund it, and they will be way more critical of that. And I don't know how this will go.
So think about it like a bubble in the economic system. A bubble being that, an asset, because of our fiat monetary system, you have the highs and the lows of the cycles, right? And you have the boom and the bust. And it's the same way with, in my mind, the military and wars. If the Great Depression was caused by the money printer, but so are the Great Wars, they're caused by the money printer. So without the money printer, you won't have great wars. You'll have the smaller skirmishes, because the booms and the busts, they'll just naturally work themselves out before they get inflated.
Interesting, yeah. By the way, maybe I should have started with that. What did you do in the military, and where were you there?
I was only in for one term. I'm an ex-Air Force, satellite microwave, SATCOM wideband communications tech. Went to tech school, Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi. I was stationed on Guam and then in Utah before I got out, Hill Air Force Base, Utah. Loved my time on Guam, beautiful island.
Interesting. Did you get to Bitcoin while there?
No, I was in the military. I joined the military in '92. So yeah. Bitcoin didn't come around for a long time for me. I went down the rabbit hole. Initially, a couple people got me into it, and the whole dynamic of, gaming currency, the thought of that, and what happened with the online game Eve, that was interesting to me. And then I fell further down the rabbit hole with what really took me down was Mike Maloney's The Hidden Secrets of Money. And I enjoy getting out in the outdoors here in Alaska, spent a lot of time gold panning, had a lot of equipment, went up in the mountain zone to claim. So I understand the dynamics of gold and how it works and what it takes to extract it from the ground. So it just naturally flowed towards Bitcoin. A lot of people struggle with it, and they struggle with not understanding what gold is and how it works. I remember I met with a couple individuals who have a decent sum of money in their lives. So they're fairly well off. So it's harder to orange pill people who are comfortable, and it's hard to orange pill people who are gold bugs. And one of them was falling straight down the rabbit hole. That one she was all the way there. And her husband turned to me and he said, so if I wanted to sell my Bitcoin or sell my gold to buy Bitcoin, how would I do that? And I go, that's the complicated question. Because if your spouse wanted to sell her Bitcoin and buy gold, she could do it right now. See the problem. You can't sell your gold to buy Bitcoin. You have it buried in the ground somewhere. You got to go dig it up. You have to ship it. You have to get it assayed. You're going to have to find a buyer. But my Bitcoin, I can sell right now and buy your gold. I just don't want to because it's inferior.
It's the most liquid market and asset ever. It's you can do it 24/7. It's kind of amazing. It's also interesting what the point you brought up, that it's harder to orange pill people who are well off. It seems like pain is a big driver for Bitcoin adoption.
Yep. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Pain. You need the pain to, and I guess that's where the biggest driver for Bitcoin adoption is then the inflation and the monetary expansion of the fiat currency where you're currently living. Like that seems to be the biggest lever for Bitcoin education, because people have to get interested in Bitcoin before you can get them educated, and the price and the devaluation of their own currencies is probably the biggest driver for that. Do you see it that way, or?
Yeah, it makes a difference. Here in Juneau, we have a huge housing crisis. We have all of this land around us that the federal government won't let us build on. So we can't expand our community. So what's the scarce desirable asset? It's just like oceanfront property in Miami. It's hard to afford it. Since COVID, it's gone up astronomically. So now we have all of these jobs in Juneau. There's so many jobs, good paying jobs, but nobody can afford to live in Juneau. You can't find housing in Juneau. So there's pain here. But even still, it's still hard to orange pill the people who are going through pain because they don't have the money to invest. It's harder for them to get a position. So I do my best just to work with them and establish that small position. Whenever I meet with somebody for the first time, I just drop them 10, 20 bucks into a wallet. I set them up with a Moon wallet, and here you go. This is my donation to you. Let's pay attention to this over time and watch what this does. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. And eventually they come back to me. Not 100% of the time, but I have more effect here in Juneau doing that, I believe, because I will always run into them again. There's no roads out. But if when I do that in other states, when I go on trips, I always try to tip in Bitcoin. And when I do, I'm able to set people up with wallets. I'm always able to get them some Bitcoin, but I don't know what they're ever going to do with it. I always give them my number. Hey, reach out to me if you have any questions, but they don't always do so. But here in Juneau, I'm always able to maintain that communication with people.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Sorry, I just saw Juneau, and really interesting and a lovely area. Oh, those are whales. Oh man, the picture that I just looked at. I thought first they're mountains. Wait, I have to show that. You see that here, Juneau? Yeah, I first thought those are mountains, but those are whales.
They're bubble feeding. Yeah, I have a boat, so we're out with the whales all the time. It's beautiful here.
It's beautiful. Wow. It's the other side of the world. I probably fly there like, I don't know how many hours. It's furthest away from Austria, I guess. Really interesting. But that's amazing. That this is that you're doing that grassroots movement and that moment. And yeah, I think dropping someone some Bitcoin in a Lightning wallet or something like that. That's a really good orange pilling thing. One last thing, because Primera Bitcoin is really great, and especially the unconference. I went to my first one in El Salvador last year in November it was, and I was amazed by the unconference. A really cool experience, but I never really talked about it on the podcast. And as I think you said that you're part of the Primera Bitcoin. You're a tutor there. What is Primera Bitcoin, and what are you doing there?
When I first joined them, I remember we had a remote meetup here in Juneau, and I had a bunch of people who just remoted in, some incredible people, Alex Danzik, Greg Foss, Lisa Huff, Don Bay, Andy Pitt, just some incredible people. Well, come to find out that Greg Foss invested in the company that put out the curriculum that Primera Bitcoin ended up using. So I was able, when I found out about it via Cafe B in the morning on Twitter, I was able to reach out to Greg Foss, and the man he's he's a beast. Love the man. He hooked me right up. I got off the phone with him, and within 10 minutes, I had a text from him saying, pick up the next call. And it was the CEO of the company that came out with the curriculum, and they put me in touch with John Dennehy in El Salvador. And that was it. The curriculum's incredible because it takes you from 0 to 60. It's not in 3.2 seconds, but it takes you the whole journey all the way across from what is money all the way through UTXO management. So you get the whole picture. You have this group of phenomenal people who you can tap for information. People share their resources. It's a really good team of people. I was actually scheduled to be there at that conference last year, but my daughter had appendicitis the night before I was leaving, so up in the ER. So I'm sorry I wasn't able to meet you down there. I was slated to be there, but once I onboarded into it, I started working and helping them develop the teacher's curriculum for it. That was fun. And teaching people here in Juneau through the curriculum, I got to figure out what works and what doesn't, and figure out how to tell what different people's interests are. Premier Bitcoin is probably the best education, basic education into the Bitcoin world that there is. It's more time consuming than maybe other methods, but it's a great institution with some great people. And John Dennehy he's just a great man. He has a true, pure vision of what money is and where we're going to go. So I strongly recommend that anybody who has the time, just go to Me Premier Bitcoin's website, download the PDF, the curriculum, and go through it. You can contact Me Premier Bitcoin, find out if there's a light node in your area that can teach you, or you can just download it online. Gabe Lord with Operation Bitcoin, he's the only thematic node for Me Premier. So he actually has a curriculum where he took their curriculum and altered it for military veterans, worked with them to alter it. So he is teaching veterans the same curriculum, but a little bit more geared towards military vets. So if you're a veteran, check out Operation Bitcoin and his light node.
I love that. Really cool. I'm fascinated by the grassroots movement and by that what Bitcoin, Mi Primera Bitcoin is doing. Really cool. I have one question for every one of my guests, and this is the question of what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
For me, I don't know. Everything rolls back to the money and monetary energy. If somebody were to come up here and spend some time up here, what would I do with them? What would I teach them? Anything in the outdoors. If it came down to fishing, halibut, salmon, or panning for gold. So for learning, get out and do stuff. Get out and go hiking. Get out and enjoy the mountains and enjoy the wildlife. And everything's not focused around the world of people. Get out of the bar, get out of the supermarket, go out in the woods, and enjoy the world.
I love that. Yeah, it's a great mission. Probably a really good thing to do also in Alaska. Thank you so much already. I have an end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And your question from the previous guest is, if you have a business or if you are in a business, how much of this their balance sheet is already in Bitcoin? I guess 0. Any developments in that direction?
For me, I have a business in Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin Alaska LLC. So
I forgot that.
Ticket sales are in Bitcoin. You get a 15% discount for those that come in Bitcoin. And then, of course, you pay full price in dollars. And it seems to be about 50-50 right now. You can change my balance sheet just by purchasing tickets in whatever format you choose to do so. As far as, that's it, 50% right now. Eventually, as I build out the Bitcoin Alaska LLC, I'm considering going into have a nonprofit wing and actually doing things with tourism for the state of Alaska and onboarding businesses into Bitcoin. So when I do that, I'm going to try and flow as much into Bitcoin as possible. Of course, operating expenses will still have to be in dollars, but anything above and beyond operating expenses, I'd hold in Bitcoin.
Really cool. I love that. Really cool. Perfect. And yeah, thank you, Wade, for being on the show. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions? We already showed the Bitcoin Alaska website. Is there anywhere else where people can reach you?
You can find me on Twitter at Alaska BTC or at Bitcoin Alaska. So that's primarily where I spend my time, is on Twitter.
Perfect. And thank you so much, Wade, for being on. And also thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye.